How
How
you
are you?
doing?
Doing great. So, welcome to another episode of Rocco's Basilisk. And I'd like to thank our sponsors, um, Blue Moon Beer and Nuke's Hot Sauce.
Oh, I'm much more curious about that hot sauce.
So, if you see the picture there, it's people blowing and a nuclear explosion is caused by their breath.
Yeah, I mean, I've had spicy food or spicy sauces that I feel are up there.
So, Nuke's Hot Sauce is started by Jake Newcomb in Portland, Oregon.
Nuke 'em, like nuke 'em over there in the Middle East.
More like NEWCOMB.
Okay, it would have been much cooler with nuke 'em.
Yeah,
Jake
like
Nuke
Duke
'em.
Nukem. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's, of course, you're supposed to think of that. It's supposed to be juggling around there in your head when you see the
Sure,
hot sauce. Yeah, but it's good. It's good stuff. And he's a friend of mine.
nice.
And he just
Over
started it at
there,
home.
where is the is it from back home east or?
Well, he's in Portland, Oregon now, but he
Oh,
used to live in Portland, Maine. He moved from Portland to Portland.
he's uh he's a his life does evolve around names a lot. I can see
Yes, I guess
Newcomb and
in Portland.
Portland.
Just wants to live in a city called Portland. Doesn't matter where it is.
had to had to invent a hot sauce that sort of had uh, onomatopoeic connotations with his own name.
Exactly.
I think that's
Yeah,
the
that
onomatopoeic.
is the word. Yeah. Yeah, because I guess you could say a nuclear explosion could sound a little bit like nuke.
Newcomb. Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know. It's more like um someone was talking or I was learning today about the loudest sounds ever. You know what the loudest sound humans have ever made?
Like a human has made or
Uh,
humans have created
humans human tools, yeah.
human
Humans have
oh
created.
wow, that must be extremely loud. I don't know,
The
I'm
loudest sound.
guessing 200 decibels, no, 300 decibels.
You were close, 224 decibels. The
Shit,
Tsar
sorry,
Bomba.
I forgot that's actually a lot. That's
Yeah,
it's a logarithmic scale, so
yeah,
224 you said.
yeah,
That's insane amount, because
yeah. It
that's
is.
wait, how many orders of magnitude more than 100 decibels, which is like extremely loud.
Yeah.
That is
Every time you add 10, you're adding a zero to the power.
right. So that holy crap, that's very loud. That's
Yeah,
that's 10 billion times louder than, a loud motorcycle,
yeah.
which is about 100 decibels.
So that was the biggest nuclear explosion that we've set off so far was 224 decibels.
How do you
Krakatoa,
measure that?
oh, theoretically,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, no one was there. They didn't have a
They
little,
didn't have a guy who
microphone.
has really sensitive hearing, good
Yeah,
ear for decibels.
yeah. Hold up this microphone, stand a
Yeah,
couple
this might.
miles away. So Krakatoa, the volcano,
Yeah.
was supposedly 310 decibels.
Wait, what?
Yeah,
How
Krakatoa,
do
the
they know
volcano.
that?
Again, some
Size and physics of it.
theoretical, and they have some Richter scale measurements, of
Right,
the
right. Because at that
earthquake.
level, I mean,
Yeah,
300 decibels, you got to get into, um, terraforming levels of
yep,
astronomical levels of, power. So it's
yeah.
beyond
It's so much
sound and
power.
earthquakes. It's like next level.
Exactly, and it's so much power that you're no longer talking about a sound wave moving through air, where the air stays where it is and it's just the wave that propagates. No, in this case, you've got the sound itself is a pressure wave that is pushing the air.
Huh.
It's got slightly different mechanics, I think, at the molecular level. And there's a ship, a Navy ship that was 40 miles away. Half of them were rendered deaf for a while.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable.
40 miles away. Half of them went temporarily deaf.
So there is some sort of a conversion of decibels to joules, right? There's got to be.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Let's see.
But it will be, think about the wavefront of the sound. It's probably going to be joules per square meter on that wavefront.
Is it possible to convert decibels to watts or joules? Which is joules per second, of course. It depends on what kind of decibels. This is funny. There's on the Mad Science Network. They have a sort of a mini Reddit something, forum, I guess, where people post questions, and this is the physics part of their forum. There's 3 questions that this guy has asked. 1, is it possible to convert decibels to watts? I'll read the questions first. Actually, there are 4 questions, sorry. And then I'll read the answers that supposedly a physicist has replied to. Question number 2 is it possible to convert decibels to joules, which is silly because it's related to first question, and again, it's just per second. But then question number 3 is it possible to create a billion decibel? I like that. And number 4, what can a billion decibels do? Okay, so first question, is it possible to convert decibels to watts? This physicist, I guess, replies, you really need to know the definition of your particular decibel in order to answer this. Decibels, being a logarithmic scale, should really be dimensionless, but occasionally they are dimensional. In acoustics, decibels are often defined as 10 times the log base 10, obviously log base is 10 times the log base 10 of the ratio of the acoustic power to a reference power. And then there's a reference to Wikipedia. Then if you know the reference power, conversion to watts is straightforward. So for instance, if X is a decibel value, then P of X equals P of 0, which is the reference, times 10 to the power of X divided by 10 watts. Okay, sometimes decibels are, however, defined differently as either 10 times the log base 10 of the scattering cross-section, which has, so in target strength, it would be decibels per meter square, or 10 times the log base 10 of the scattering cross-section per unit volume. So there isn't a clear answer to your question. You really need to know what kind of decibels you're trying to convert. Okay. Decibels to joules, he says, again, this depends on what kind of decibels, assuming the former example with blah, 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 watts of power to then given an appropriate time, t, you could calculate it just by multiplying with the time. So the watts per multiplied by time. Now it gets into the silly but interesting question. Number 3, is it possible to create a billion decibel? Again, it depends. For scattering cross-section examples, the answer is no. He's basically saying, no, you can't create a billion decibel. Are you insane? For the relative power example, I suppose you could just choose an unrealistically small P0, the reference power, such that the relative decibels is a billion. Because a billion decibels, that's like a 1 with a billion zeros.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
yeah. So a much lower number, 1,000. I heard an interesting description of this. If you had a speaker that could create a sound that was 1,000 decibels here on Earth, supposedly that's enough power that instead of the sound propagating through the atmosphere, it would compress the air into millions of microscopic black holes.
With 1,000 decibels?
Supposedly 1,000 decibels sound, which the mechanics of are totally impossible, would be enough. It would compress the air enough to create black holes.
I think we should do that.
How loud can you yell?
I'm a firm believer that science should do what science can do. Meaning, if something is possible, you should just do it. meaning, and the reasoning is, and it should be done openly and transparent.
Well, it should be interesting things. Like, for instance, it's scientifically possible to spread peanut butter
of course. It should be
on satellites.
There's always going to be someone for whom it's interesting. Some weird, quirky scientist or malicious or insane government or funding agency, funding body. They'll be like, yeah, we want to know if we can build 1,000 decibel weapon, right? And that's why I think it should be done. Like, by denying it or by oppressing it or trying to hold it back with laws and regulation, you're just going to push it on the ground. And then it's going to be these shady international organizations or even malicious governments that will fund the research. And it will happen anyway, but now it's going to happen on the ground and it's going to be owned by some sort of private body or foreign body that you don't know what intents they have. So,
does that apply to synthetic viruses?
Right.
Should we investigate new ways to create viruses to kill people? Should that even be something the government funds?
Okay, let's play with the idea of not doing it. Not only not funding it, but regulating so that you cannot research on that.
But you got to be specific. Are you still allowed to research the effect of viruses that already exist?
Yes, let's say you are, but you're not allowed to do anything on synthetic viruses.
Okay.
So what do you think would happen?
I think that
you think scientists are going to be, all right, I'm not going to go there. I know my curiosity wants to go there, but hey, the ruling bodies, who are all, of course, much more stupid than I, because I have 2 Nobel Prizes, have told me that I can't research on this. So no, I'm not going there. You really think that's how they're going to be?
Only 2? So to answer this question, there's a show on Amazon called Utopia, which is very well done in the British version. In the American version, I don't like it as much, but they basically redid it in the American version. But what it's about is go back to the early 1970s, maybe late 1960s. The Soviets started a biological weapons program. And the Western countries, they were very afraid and they wanted something to fight back, but they had basically had agreements saying that we can't really do this ourselves. So funding came from all the first world developed nations to a secret organization that was then going to study biological weapons in secret, but outside of the jurisdiction or watchful eye of any given country. Then, at the end of the Cold War, those countries were like, yeah, we don't need this program anymore. And that organization, now very well funded, said, we don't really want to stop.
Yeah.
Something like that might already exist.
Right. So I don't know. I feel like we're going to be, especially with science, we're going to be careful with making certain areas of research and human curiosity and exploration forbidden. You don't, but maybe there are other ways. Maybe you don't have to like make it completely, Wild West and open and free. But you also don't need to create, forbidden areas of research that are basically no-goes. But you can maybe say that, yes, certain areas of research are heavily regulated, meaning there's absolutely funding for you. There's, you're not legally forbidden from doing research in those, but in order to get the funding, in order to, do research in those areas legally, you need to go through certain ethical scrutiny, and your processes and your labs sort of quality management systems and whatnot need to be scrutinized at a sort of deeper level. Just like when people do
research
like on
the IRB
animals or on humans.
The IRB.
Correct. So maybe that way we can actually allow research even in areas of very dubious or questionable, like I mean, and then it becomes a question of like dubious or questionable according to who and whose morals, so for instance, as we know, stem cell research is very debated here in the US, while for instance in Europe it's not nearly as much as here. So yeah, I think it's much better to say, okay, according to our current society's culturally accepted rules and standards, we make these areas a little bit more sensitive. I mean, it's already the case with, like, if you want to do research on nuclear physics, right? Your lab has to show a certain level of safety measures and quality measures and whatnot. So why not just introduce that with things, but at whatever level where the governing bodies or the NFS or whatever feels that, okay, this group is safe to do research on synthetic viruses.
Yeah, like the Department of Energy exerts a lot of control over anybody that has nuclear materials. Right. When I was studying physics, we had plutonium on campus. And I was one of 4 people on campus that had the key to get into that part of the lab. And I spent as little time as I could in that lab.
Yeah, I hope so.
We had the plutonium mixed with beryllium. It was in these rods, and it was in a box with a lot of lining, a lot of shielding in it. And we stacked up lead bricks that thick all around it.
Wow.
And I remember, I think this is just a joke, but the lab next door had a bunch of grad students that were all balding on top. And I just kept thinking, man, is there a relationship between this? So I spent as little time as I could.
Please don't tell me that before you start working at this lab, you had plenty of hair.
I did.
Oh, no.
But I actually kept my hair well into my 20s.
Okay.
That was back when I was 19.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's funny.
So before we get off the topic,
I've always wondered this. Why is it stored in rod form?
Well, this was in rods because it was just mixed with beryllium. It wasn't pure plutonium, and it's just an easy way to make a metal, extrude it, and then if you have a consistent width to that small rod, then you can cut it off in very precise measurements.
Okay. So it has to do with handling.
Yeah. Now we have rods in a nuclear plant because of the design of wanting to put them in and pull them up
Insert and pull
to either speed up or slow down the nuclear process.
which seems like such a crude, almost
Hey,
Stone Age approach to it.
it was the best we could do in the 50s when we were designing these, and
Yeah.
then to get them approved by the 60s. I
Well,
mean, we
have we
put in,
done much better? I actually don't
we
know what
have
to.
way better designs now, way better. But the regulatory process to get things approved is a long process, and a lot of research has to be put into this, research dollars. But the molten salt reactors that they've designed now are just way better. And they're
Yeah.
the kind of things where if you turn them off, they go safe.
Yeah.
They never melt down. And that's our fission reactors. And in the future, we're going to have fusion reactors. We are getting closer and closer and closer.
Yeah.
They had the tokamaks and then the stellarator, which is like a tokamak with these weird twists in it. And now
It's
there's
yeah.
another, there's a
I
new
haven't quite
one.
understood why those twists are good, but somehow they
Yeah.
make
They're
them more
good
efficient.
because of the momentum of the plasma particles in the plasma beam. As they move from one part to another part, they get
So they
trapped in
don't
the
just rotate in this dimension, they
They do.
rotate in this dimension too.
Well, they're in this way, but it's a ribbon that some of the particles are here and they're moving kind of like this. And it's the thing that's important is the shape of the magnetic field in each part of it. And that magnetic field keeps changing. And what they find is with the flow of the plasma particles through that unique weird shape, there's less collisions with the side, less energy lost through the sides.
I see.
Somehow the beam is maintained better, but they have an even better shape now. There's something that it's a magnetic bottle of a different shape. I don't think it's a donut shape. I think it's more circular, I guess, or cylindrical. I just learned about it the other day,
Wow.
but it should even be.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I was a teenager, meaning, 20 plus years ago, um, I would be reading about the latest developments in fusion research and how it was just around the corner. This is like 25 years ago.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's been harder
Still
than we all thought.
waiting
That's,
for around the corner.
that's what it is. It was harder than we all thought. I remember in physics in college, we looked at the binding energy of different atoms. And the curve looks something like this. So it goes up and then slowly down. And so at the beginning, when you're going from hydrogen fusing together to helium,
Right.
how energy is released.
That's right.
And when you're going from plutonium down to lead, that goes up on this curve too, and somehow that releases energy too.
Hmm.
So going in either direction on this curve, going up is going to release energy. And
Yeah.
I don't remember much else about that. I feel like it's a very vague memory at this point.
Yeah. Oh, there's
But
so many things from
before
those
we get
years
off
that
of
are big
viruses,
memories for me as well.
before we get off of viruses, we're in the middle of a pandemic now. Let's talk about this for a
You
little bit.
think we're still in the middle of it? Or are we at the tail end of it? Or
I think we're nearing the tail end of it. And this is a great time because we have this straightforward way forward. We have this vaccine. We have like 4 vaccines. They work, and people are getting vaccinated as we speak.
do they work? I've heard different accounts on that. I've heard that it's uncertain how well they work. They work, but they seem to be less effective on some of these new strains or these new the strains that are mutations. There's
Well,
at least one of them that's very aggressive, the London mutation or whatever it's no South African mutation. So
yeah, the AstraZeneca one was the least effective vaccine, and it is apparently less effective against the strain that is now dominant in South Africa.
right,
I don't know about the others, but I think this is amazing technology.
For
Basically,
sure.
most of the mRNA technology is wonderful. It's been around, but this is the first real practical upscaled use that we've.
People, I think most people don't understand. I mean, obviously, I don't understand it fully as well, but I think most people don't even appreciate, which I do, how amazing this technology
Yeah.
is, how futuristic and advanced it is
Yep.
that we can do this with
Two other.
mRNA.
Yeah. Two other things I think we can cure with mRNA technology: AIDS and cancer.
You think that?
Here's why.
You think so?
So, with HIV, there are other proteins on its surface that once we can code them, we can have mRNA messages that send messages to the cells, and then they start printing up the antibodies for it. I think we can do this.
Yeah, that doesn't seem too far-fetched. It's another virus. It's different, of course,
Yep.
and but I can, without knowing too much about the details of the technology, I can see how that would be true. Yes.
Yeah. And
For
then cancer.
cancer.
All you got to do is you've got to sequence the genes in your cancer. So whenever you get cancer, each tumor is going to have its own DNA sequence. It's going to be, a slight change from the rest of your body.
Sure. But
And
isn't each
that
tumor, like
sequence,
if you have metastasis, then isn't each metastasis going to have a slightly different genetic
maybe,
sequence?
maybe,
Yeah, that's the thing. I don't know enough to.
yeah.
Okay, all right, but your reasoning is, let's say the cancer body, the tumor, has homogeneous sort of
Hmm.
DNA that's different from your DNA, and then what?
Different enough that you can create something that will target only those cells. I think this mRNA technology is going to unlock a whole lot of stuff.
Hmm. But as you said, it's been around for a while, so why hasn't it? Why hasn't it been? Maybe it has actually. I don't know enough about
No,
that field of
it
research.
hasn't. This has been the first real visible thing that the whole world is looking at. So the company Moderna
Yeah.
staked their claims on mRNA technology. Even their stock symbol is mRNA.
Which
So
really?
yeah, yeah, that's what they're all about.
Oh,
And they're the best at
that's awesome
this.
because that also seems like
Yeah,
an abbreviation for Moderna.
it does. Isn't it great?
That's genius.
It is. And that's why they're better at it than Pfizer. And that's why they
Yeah.
were able to get out first before Pfizer. And I think they're like 1% more effective. And their vaccine can be transported at a higher temperature than Pfizer's.
That I did read about it. Yeah.
So
Okay, so
when do you think you are going to get the vaccine? Realistically, in California as a young, healthy person?
yeah,
When?
yeah. I would be I'll be happily surprised if I got it this year.
Mm.
And
Yeah,
then I'm talking like, November this year, December.
I'm expecting September. That's what I'm
Yeah.
guessing. Yeah. But
Yeah, I don't
I'm
know.
actually
Maybe
I'm
Oregon
actually
is
ready.
maybe Oregon is doing a lot better, but like California, I don't know. From what I've heard, it's not like they're not exactly doing great with vaccinations.
I'm in Washington State actually.
Oh, sorry. Yes, you are. Yes,
Yeah.
even.
But
Oh, sorry.
I'm protected. I got the poor man's vaccine. Do you know what that is?
Don't say Clorox or something like that Donald Trump recommended.
I got COVID.
You got COVID.
I got COVID. Yes. And I almost didn't know.
Holy shit. When did you get
So
COVID?
I believe I got it on January 28th. I got a
Wow, that
beer
was
with a
very
friend of mine.
precise.
Yeah, because I don't go out anymore. So the one time I did go out, I had a beer with a friend of mine who's a little older than me. I thought maybe if he's fine, I'll be fine. And we got a beer indoors. Some places were open.
Oh,
And that's the only time I could have gotten it. And I felt about 5 days later, I felt tired. And I felt really tired for about 3 or 4 days. I never had
did
a
you have
fever.
any like regular symptoms Graham, usually have when you get sick?
Tired. That's it.
That's
Headache.
it. That's
Headache
it.
and tired. Yeah. No fever.
Jesus.
I had no cough. But you know what the kicker was? After a few days of that, I lost sense of smell.
Oh,
Yeah.
and that's
But
when you knew?
that's when I knew. But I eventually took a test, and the test was positive. So that's
How
when I knew for
long
sure.
after you had been in contact with him did you take the test?
I got the test last Friday. I
Oh
thought it was
wow.
going to be negative because I thought I'd be over it already.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking. Yeah.
I'm at the very end. And I think they've said that the RNA can stick around in your system longer than the actual virus is there. I'm
Huh.
not certain about that. I'm not certain. But
Are you still feeling any of those symptoms like tiredness or
nope,
anything?
nope. So I felt those symptoms from like 5 days after I saw him. So 5 days after the 28th for 3 days. And after that, no more symptoms
You felt
except for,
perfectly the same again.
yeah, except for the sense of smell, which is very slowly coming back. And I test myself every day.
Was that honey? No, green tea? Oh,
No, it's a
oh
balsam.
yes.
Yes, balsam
And
and
you can smell
cedar
it now?
scented. Barely.
Oh,
It's slowly coming back. Some people,
wow.
it takes them weeks or months for their sense of smell to come back. I heard a very good description as to why and what happened. You have, of course, those olfactory cells in your upper nose area.
Yeah.
Those are actually fine. They are not affected by the virus. But there's a whole bunch of other cells all around them that support them and help them live, survive, interact with the air, whatever it is they do. But all those supporting cells, they have the two ACE receptors. The very things that the coronavirus attacks, they have those in an abundance. So the coronavirus doesn't kill your olfactory cells. It kills off all the supporting cells. And those can take a little bit to grow back.
Wow.
That is why I lost sense of smell.
That's incredible.
So I did not expect it, but hey, here I am. I'm through it. I feel great.
And supposedly you are immune for
months.
For a while, yeah.
Yeah, at least until I can get the vaccine. And I believe this is going to be part of the flu shot from now on. We're going to get our shots, our corona flu shots,
Yeah.
Just get our shots in every fall, and we'll be good. I feel like this is
we'll be good until the next. I mean, look, there have been scientists in this field who've been telling us for decades now that world population, globalization, and the fact that we interact so much more with each other than we did 100 years ago, or even 50 years ago, have accelerated or catalyzed all of the ways in which mass, what do you call it, pandemic level viruses can emerge, mutate, emerge. So, I think we're just going to see more and more of these and more frequently and probably even more aggressively over the next 50 years.
But we are ready more ready than we ever were before.
Hopefully, yeah. But what kind of world is going to become where, because we're ready, even after we've had all the vaccines and flu shots for this thing, people are going to probably, people are going to probably be more socially cautious.
I hope not. It doesn't have to be that way. In fact, it can go the other way. And here's why. What would you feel like in a world where you knew that your chances of getting anything, even a mild flu, were just so tiny? Because as soon as a new flu emerges somewhere, scientists find out about it, they upload the genome, and boom, everyone can get the shot. And what if once a month you can get a shot anywhere? Like maybe any government building, you walk in, instead of holding your hand under the thing that gets sanitizer, you just hold your arm up, and the robot gives you a shot with the latest of last night's download.
I mean, yeah. If we get to a point where it's that fast and effective, then it's like using soap and
It's a global immune system. Because think about it, the coronavirus particles all over the world, they can't communicate with each other. We can. We have a superpower.
Yeah, we can communicate with each other, but we don't always do it well or effectively.
No.
Especially between governments. There's secrecy, there's all sorts of stupid human stupidity that actually gives the viruses an advantage.
However, some things markets can fix. And it turns out people don't like being sick, and they really don't like dying.
Yeah.
And I think people will pay for the ability to not die. Oh, speaking of immortality, Dr. David Sinclair at Harvard Medical is doing a lot of research on cellular repair or epigenetic repair.
Right.
He calls it the information theoretic theory of life. And it all has to do with what we call aging is an aggregation of epigenetic mistakes accrued over time. Not genetic mistakes. He believes they're epigenetic mistakes.
Epigenetic. I've heard this before, yeah.
And almost every cell seems to have the original information intact still. You just have to remind it or put it in the right state so they can access that information.
I gotta just pause there for a second and ask a question. Isn't the problem with epigenetics that in terms of information, it's a couple of orders of magnitude more permutations and amount of information that can be expressed in epigenetical sort of form than in genetic form?
I think so.
Because of all the ways of permutations that you can think of how the protein is folded, the DNA is folded, the molecule is folded into the chromosomes, right?
Yeah, I think it's wrapped around histones, and there are methyl groups on the outside that make other sections inactive. So
that just tells me that wrapping can be done because it's so long, the DNA molecule, that wrapping can be done in probably, for all intents and purposes, an infinite amount of ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Supposedly, though, that information is still somehow there and can be re-accessed. Now, when you start off, you have a pluripotent stem cell that can be anything, right? And eventually, they settle into different kinds: bone cells, skin cells, brain cells, whatever. And then it stays that one thing for the rest of your life. But eventually, mistakes start to occur, and it starts to forget. What am I? Am I a skin cell? No, I'm a hair cell. I'm a hair follicle. Right. So now you got hair grown out of places that you didn't have before when you're an old person. Or you have, these cells up here forget to make, my head's forgotten to make hair, it doesn't do that as much anymore. So, but somehow that information, some of it is still there. And there are things you can do, certain genes you can activate to make any cell go all the way back to a stem cell. And what he is investigating is out of the 4 that were used to make stem cells, he's selected 3 of them And he's figured out that if you use them to a certain degree, you can repair some of that epigenetic damage. And
Wow.
there are, compounds you can take now that will help with this repair process. The sirtuins are things that are already naturally trying to do this, trying to do cellular repair. Sirtuins and maybe the AMPK pathway, I forget. But there are a couple different pathways that he's done research on. And he's found things like resveratrol. He proved that does help activate sirtuins to do cellular repair, meaningful repair. And then some research came out against it, so he had to do his own research again to further detail, but he did prove the case. The other thing is NAD is a molecule in our cells, generated in the cells, that helps with cellular repair. And you need NAD precursors as, coming from your food, for instance. Vitamin B, for instance, is a precursor.
Okay.
But there are newer types of vitamin B, one called NR and one called NMN, that are more effective at creating NAD levels in your cells. That, like for me, being over 40, I have a lower level of NAD in my cells than I did when I was in my 20s. And boosting that can help as well. Well, I've been taking NR and resveratrol along with vitamin D and vitamin C and things like that during this whole pandemic. And maybe that's part of why my body did great with COVID. I was fine. I don't know if that's why.
Interesting.
But I don't think it hurt.
Huh. Yeah, I would, if you have research and stuff, papers, whatever, you can send me on that. That would be very interesting for me too.
Yeah. David Sinclair's book is the best resource. I just read it.
David Sinclair. What's the book called?
I forget, but Dr. David Sinclair at Harvard Medical. I think he only wrote one book. Something about aging. You find it?
He runs the Center for the Biology of Aging at Harvard Medical. He has 3 books. No, sorry, 2 books.
I read Lifespan.
Lifespan is the one, and then there's an upcoming one called Just in Time: The Discovery of Sirtuin and How It Will Change Everything. Huh. Fascinating.
Yeah. So I think we may see in our lifetime the discoveries that are going to enable people to live forever.
Jesus, I just realized, so I see photos of him, and then I saw how it says on Wikipedia that he's 52. Holy crap, this guy looks like he's
35, 32?
Yeah, like younger than me.
Yeah.
I mean, I was kind of expecting that from someone who claims that he's telling the truth on this stuff. But boy, wow, he does look like 10, 15 years younger than his age.
Yeah.
Oh, he was on Joe Rogan.
Yeah, he was on there twice, I think.
Okay, I'm gonna look into this guy. And he gave a Google talk. Those are good. Okay. All right.
Hey, so since the last time I saw you, next topic, we almost lost the United States. We almost lost our republic. From your perspective, what did that all look like? Were you even in the country at the time?
I was. You're talking about January 6th, or?
Yes, January 6th.
Yeah. I wasn't here for the election, but that was deliberate. I chose to be in Sweden for that. Because I just didn't know where things were going to go. But yes, during January 6th, I was here. I mean, I had friends from Sweden messaging me, asking me if I was sure that I wanted to continue living in a banana republic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the kind of shit we saw when growing up, and yeah, like certain, forming or sort of falling apart African nations, right? Former banana republic, and it was very. I mean, so many things to say about that. First and foremost, it was very scary to see how easy that could be done, easily. And I don't think that was an accident. Like the world's most powerful nation, the world's most military powerful nation and army, like it's ridiculous that its stronghold of power can be seized with a couple of 100,000, whatever, militia.
I think it was probably more like 200 people that went in. Yeah, such a small group was able to take that.
And I mean, for me, it was a wake-up call. But I think what's much more important is that it's a wake-up call for those in power, elected officials. That because the fact that he was acquitted from his impeachment, whatever they, just sends a very strong signal to maniacs out there that, yeah, if you just do this at a even more organized way, military style, not hooligan style, and you have larger numbers, more firepower, then you will succeed. You will kill the politicians you need to kill. And if you are the sort of leader behind it all, so you're not even there on scene, you can easily manipulate. This is, I mean, fucking, Middle Eastern terrorists have been perfecting this for decades now. But you can manipulate young, impressionable, trigger happy, 20-something-year-olds to go and do the killing for you and get killed, because that's what's going to happen, or trialed or whatever. But you have accomplished, as the mastermind behind it, or group of masterminds behind it, you've accomplished your goal of getting those politicians killed. Because guess what? You take out the competition, you have destabilized, the other side, or maybe even both sides, if that's what you're interested in, for enough for something bigger to take place, right? Your mission is not, of course, to take over, the government and do a coup d'etat. I don't think you can do that in this. There's just so many other levels of power, and the military needs to be behind you and stuff. But you can still take out key politicians. I think it was a big mistake to let Trump go, let him off the hook, because I don't know. I hate to say this, but it's gonna create a future where the assassination of JFK is gonna seem like, oh, the good old days when that only happened every 30 years and it was just one person.
Yeah.
It's a very dangerous thin ice that the U.S. democracy is walking on by not taking this seriously. It's my opinion.
Yeah, and I have been trying to understand why people have been making the decisions they have. Like Kevin McCarthy, the Republican minority leader in the House, he was livid on January 6th. As Trump supporters were storming the Capitol, he calls Trump and gets him on the phone. And apparently there were some witnesses to this call. And he says, your people are storming the Capitol. Please call them off. Call them off. They're going to kill us. And Trump said to him, I think that's Antifa. And then Kevin McCarthy says, no, it's not Antifa. These are your people. Call them off. And Trump said, well, I think they're more upset about the election than you are. And
wow.
Kevin, supposedly he swear to the president, says something like, fuck you, something like that. And, you know, basically the president at first put forth that conspiracy theory that it's Antifa. And then he accepted that they were his people, but said implicitly that they had the right opinion about the election and you should too. Yeah.
So, yeah. While they were Antifa, they were doing the wrong thing. But the exact same actions, while suddenly they were his supporters, the exact same action by definition. That was sort of justified.
Yeah. And Kevin McCarthy felt like that on that day. And he actually told several other representatives about that meeting immediately, passed on the message, how angry he was. But then within a week, he was down in Mar-a-Lago making nice with Trump. And it all comes back to they represent people. And they have to curry favor with the people they represent. And so many of the people they represented that voted for them, so many of them still like Trump even now.
Yeah.
Many of them even believe in QAnon, even now.
Yeah.
And Trump, he really expertly and very deftly leveraged many of the tools that the Russians had been the leaders in for a long time.
Yeah.
Using disinformation or just peppering the airwaves with so many lies that you give up trying to know what the truth is.
Yes. You make sure you draw the signal in a lot of numbers.
But now the cult of personality is the biggest part of this all. And on the news recently, people have been describing this more, I believe, closer to what it was, a almost religious following. And what I learned in religion was that you have to have faith, and when facts come up that challenge your faith, you have to be able to disregard them. And I see that same process happening here with many people who are very enamored by Trump and his way of talking. And when he talks, it presses all the buttons in your brain that are instinctually there to tell you when someone's a good person, a good leader, and telling the truth. Even when they say things that are completely false.
Yeah.
They can say something completely false, you know it to be false, but because that person says it, you start to think, well, maybe it's true, or maybe I just want to be loyal more than I want to, accept truth. And maybe loyalty is more important. Now, who are we as humans? We are multicellular organisms that can also interact and cooperate at the next level up as social beings, right? So what are the dynamics of those larger social groups? And what are the effective ones? Well, going way back to tribalism, the effective ones are the ones that would make a group more fit.
Yeah, ensure the survival of the tribe. Exactly.
Of the tribe, not the person, of the tribe. And I believe that instinct.
You've hit the nail on its head there.
Yeah.
I think.
So I want to hit another nail though.
Yeah.
And you're gonna like this nail. So the way that cooperation is mediated is via instincts, much more so than laws. Laws are a brand new invention from only 10,000 years ago, at most, probably less. But instincts have been with us for a super long time. They've developed slowly. Now, the morality instincts are the important ones here. What should you do in one situation or another? And I think if we can just discuss those 5 major morality dimensions that Jonathan Haidt brings up.
Yeah.
harm, integrity, purity,
Purity. This. No.
respect of leader or obedience to a leader,
Yeah.
and
Authority.
group loyalty.
Right.
Those are the 5. Now, for some people, some of us, myself included, I really only have 2.
Yeah.
Don't harm others and have integrity. Those are the only 2 I have. No harm and be honest. The other 3 do not feel like morality for me. There can be someone who has none of these, and I can still see them as a completely moral person. But there are plenty of people in our world and in our country that do not think that. For instance, my parents. They believe that purity is a big part of morality. Now,
Mm-hmm.
some people apply purity to sexuality. Some people apply it to food, what you eat. And you can see this in religions that go back thousands of years.
Yeah.
That if you eat certain things, you are
Yeah.
impure.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you touch it,
Sure.
if you touch a dead body, you are impure. Or if you do certain sex acts of certain people, you are impure.
Yeah.
So, what is the implication of having some people that have a 2-dimensional morality and other people that have a 5-dimensional morality? Are they going to be able to cooperate in meaningful survival ways that the 2-dimensional people cannot? Now, these 2-dimensional people over here, us, maybe we focus a lot on honesty and don't harm others. We focus on that a lot. That's what all the social justice stuff is about. Don't harm the people who are oppressed
Yeah.
and be honest. But then the 5-dimensional people over here, they get all upset about new trends or the way if certain people want to love other people that they don't feel good about, they get all up in arms about, some people still can't accept homosexuality.
Yeah.
Um, there are people who think that you just need to respect Donald Trump because he's your leader. God put him there. So these people,
Yeah.
they have the 5 things to pay attention to. So I think necessarily they're going to be paying less attention to the whole honesty thing. So when Donald Trump lies 30,000 times within 4 years in verifiable ways, in public and recorded ways, that doesn't make them hate him. They almost don't really pay attention to that. That's just one of the pieces of information. What's really important is that he is their leader and they respect their leader. And he is representing their group, so they're loyal to the group. And he speaks to some instincts in them. And of course, there's white tribalism in America. It's been here since the beginning. It's still here. And he speaks to that in ways that maybe aren't super direct, but everybody really knows how he feels about Mexicans and Chinese and Muslims. But that group, even though it's not organized around truth, it's still organized. In fact, it's organized at a higher level dimensionality than the rest of us. What does that mean for how we combat this and how we again become a society based on truth?
Yeah. Very good. Very good point. I mean, you definitely have more Trump supporters amongst your friends and family and relatives and whatnot. So, I mean, you clearly have had more exposure and thus been able to put much more thought into it. My perspective, even though I've lived in the States for 7 years, and of course 4 of those have been under Donald J. Trump as president. My perspective is still, I would say, much of an outsider's perspective, outsider insider, if you like. um, and it's because I don't have the exposure you do at that sort of intimate level to Trump supporters. It's more whatever I see on the late night shows and the sort of comedy news shows. Um, I can only I feel only comfortable. I only feel comfortable making very general, high-level statements about the situation and not too detailed. And sort of my general high-level conclusion is that either American democracy is deeply flawed in ways that are maybe too complex for me to understand, or it's not just American democracy, but democracy fundamentally is a flawed system that sometimes can really diverge and degenerate in destructive ways. It's sort of inherent in how it's designed, but we've rarely seen that happen. And what we're witnessing in the U.S. is one of those, special conditions under which that will happen. Not just in the U.S., anywhere in the world where democracy is implemented and those conditions apply. So both are bad news for the U.S., but one is also bad news for all other nations that are now kind of starting to experience, like Sweden, like many of the democracies in Europe, light, very, very light versions of what we witnessed in America in the past 4 years, where it's not just the rise of right-wing populism, as some label it, not in my opinion. It's the rise of powers that want to, and it's usually right-wing powers, but in theory, it could be any kind of power. It could be extreme left-wing power too. But powers that want to manipulate and steer politics in a direction that's favorable for them. And that they can do it so much more easily these days than they could in the past. Like propaganda was this big thing that was like, ooh, watch out for propaganda, during the two great wars and what came afterwards. But that was like the extent of it. It was very naive and sort of cute at this point, where it's like not a complex thing. It's like it's pretty simple and straightforward. It's propaganda, and you were taught how to watch out for it and see it. Now those kind of manipulations happen in such complex, sophisticated, subtle ways that that I think expose or rather what's the word, exploit some of these flaws that have been there all along in the democratic system, but can only be exploited now because those tools exist. If those tools existed 200 years ago, those democracies would have experienced the same things.
I believe that it was exploited on purpose. This was not an accident. So
for sure.
every system has faults, and actually every system we will ever make will always have faults. I believe that Kurt Gödel's incompleteness theorem applies not only to a formal logic system, but to any system of government.
Right.
We will always have faults. Now, the Soviets had really become experts, and they were just at the top of the game for decades and decades and decades. And we know this goes all the way back to probably the 70s, if not before, because of KGB agents, high-level ones, that defected during the 80s. And there are hours of testimony from them that is now declassified. And you can watch some of it on YouTube.
Yep.
But at least during the 80s, back when Vladimir Putin was a KGB agent, they had to put in, I believe, something like 25% of their time dedicated to creating disinformation and injecting it into English language news sources around the world, like the India Times, for instance.
Right.
And they had to talk about this in their yearly review. Just like any American corporation, KGB agents in the 80s had a yearly review. Isn't that crazy? Anyway, we now know the exact source and the way that the KGB injected a false story about the CIA creating AIDS to kill off blacks and gays.
Oh yeah. I remember.
That was KGB disinformation injected through the India Times, an English language newspaper, and CBS picked it up and other people picked it up. I believe that that same trend, the same division of the Russian government years later is still doing this. You had the Internet Research Organization over there that was doing this, whatever it was called. And Russian trolls hang out on 4chan and 8chan. And I believe it was a Russian troll on 8chan that had the QAnon account.
QAnon, yeah.
Started QAnon.
Many reasonable people seem to have drawn the same conclusion, yeah. Oh, QAnon. We could do an entire episode on QAnon, actually. Jesus.
Yeah.
Jesus.
And Michael Flynn, what was he, former Secretary of Defense or something? He is a QAnon member, and there's some video of him online with his family or friends or something standing around a fire saying, "So go we one, so go all, go we all," and
oh God,
giving the QAnon pledge. And to think that all of that started with a Russian troll on 8chan. That Russian troll better have gotten the Employee of the Month award.
Yeah. No, I mean, I know the American right, alt-right, whatever, the Trump supporters, the Republicans, would rather die than to admit that they've been outsmarted by the Russians. More than outsmarted, completely played with.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what's going to come out in the next few years, but I'm still
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I'm still very fishy about this fact that all during the 90s, American banks wouldn't lend Trump money because he was too bad of a risk. So the Russians did.
Yeah.
It's
incredible how many Americans are kind of just turning a blind eye to that. It's incredible.
Yeah.
Listen, my friend, I do.
Shall we call it?
Get going, but we should just do this more often and keep them around an hour or whatever, instead of I mean, previously I guess we did like multi-hour, like 2-3 hours almost, and did them less frequently. But I like this. I like this format of like
yeah. Let's do what feels right.
And whenever there's an opportunity to bring a friend or a special guest, and we'll do that. But I like this.
Awesome.
If for nothing else, just recording it for ourselves is very valuable to me.
Good to see you, brother.
Likewise, Graham.
We'll talk soon.
Take care. Stay in touch.